phases. But just to give a brief bio, Mr. Tillerson hails from Wichita Falls, Texas, and he joined Exxon in 1975 as a production engineer. And then he quite rapidly and ably climbed up the corporate ladder until he reached his current position as CEO in 2006. Now, the content of the presentation today is going to touch upon the issues that the world is facing, and perhaps in one of the most challenging time periods that we have had in recent history, and also the role that CAPSARC as a new institution is going to play in that, in creating solutions and attempting to resolve some of the most dynamic issues. What I would like to do, I would just like to make a point. If we look a few weeks ago, the news that we heard, it was quite momentous in that the world's population has reached 7 billion people. 7 billion people. Now that's an enormous number of people who are now on the face of this earth. So what does that mean? If I just give a brief timeline, at the dawn of the 20th century, the world's population was about 1.6 billion people. Fast forward to 1987, it reached about 5.1 billion. Move on to the beginning of the 21st century, the year 2000, then it reached about 6.1 billion. And then a mere 12 years later, the world's population has reached 7 billion people. And it's estimated that within about a mere 15 years or so, by about 2030, the world's population is going to be about 8.3 billion people. Now, what does that imply? It implies that all these people, of course, are going to want to have a relatively high standard of life. They're going to want to have modern amenities. They're going to want to have secure access to electricity, consistent and secure electricity and energy. And how are we going to provide that? Well, it's a truism to say that energy is the lifeblood of the modern economy, but still it's true nonetheless. So Saudi Arabia is going to be a key component of supplying that energy for future economic growth. And CAPSARC is going to be one of the organizations that is going to facilitate and enable and create and mold that vision. Now, without further ado, I would like to hand the floor over to Rex, and basically I would like to set up a bit of housekeeping, and we're going to take a few questions at the end, but if you can please make your questions as concise as possible, and if you can please make certain that your questions pertain directly to the issues that Rex brings up during his presentation, we'd be quite appreciative. Thank you very much. And if we can please give a round of applause to Mr. Rex Tillerson.
So what we're going to do now is we're going to ask a few questions of Rex, and I will actually use my mandate as moderator to begin the questions, if you don't mind. And fundamentally, I'd like to ask you, Rex, what do you think the future contours of the world's energy sector will look like by about 2030? And also, as a corollary to that, what kind of energy company is Exxon Mobil going to be?
Well, I think if you think about from now to 2030, that's not a very long time. Here we sit in 2011 today, so that's less than 20 years. And as I think most of us who have spent our lives in this industry understand, the nature of energy is to understand very long-term time horizons, very long-term time frames. It is a capital-intensive industry. It is a technologically driven and enabled industry. And therefore, the technology has to develop in order to create the next opportunities for energy development, whether they be in conventional sources, or as has been mentioned by Khalid and others, the sudden opening of unconventional resources as new sources of supply to the world's energy needs. So 20 years is not such a long time, and in fact, I can take you beyond to the middle of the century, and my answer would not be too different. Whether it's 2030, 2040, or beyond, my expectation that the world's energy sources of energy supply mix are not going to be too different than they are today. Oil, natural gas, coal, and yes, nuclear are all going to play the same important role in the future as they play today, and roughly in the same proportions. As the renewable components and the alternative fuels components are developed and enabled by ongoing technology advances, they will grow at a very rapid pace, much more rapid than the conventional sources. But you have to remember they start from a very small base. And all energy metrics, people I think have a difficult time understanding and having context for the enormity of the scale of the global energy complex. So while wind, solar, hydro, all other forms of energy, biofuels, will continue to develop, even at double-digit growth rates, 20 to 30 years from now, they will still only comprise a single-digit percentage of the global energy mix. So the world is going to need, demand, and require the same sources of energy that it uses today. And I think, as others have mentioned, and I've addressed it only briefly in my remarks, the importance of energy efficiency to meet as much of that demand as is possible is going to be a critical enabler to the world's future energy supply. In terms of Exxon Mobil, we'll look a lot, 20 and 30 years from now, we'll look a lot like we do today. We are a petroleum and petrochemical company. It's what we know. It's what we think we're best at. It's what we spend a lot of our research and technology development around, is how to access with technology and open up new sources of energy supply in the conventional petroleum sources, and then understand what is happening on the technology front around alternatives, whether it be biofuels or other sources of energy, so that we have an appreciation of how we will fit in the years to come.
Well, I think, Rex, that's very interesting, because you pointed out the inherent obstacles within renewable energy in order for it to take an increasing role in the global energy mix. So in particular, what you stated is that there are definite problems in terms of economic viability, and also there are problems with scalability. So do you think that these challenges can be overcome in the near to mid-term with renewable energy?
Well, I think, and you have to almost talk renewable energy source by source, because they all have their own unique attributes, positive, and their own unique challenges. From the standpoint of wind energy, the challenge, as we all know, is one of intermittency. One need only look at Spain, which probably has, one of the largest complexes of wind electricity generation that's been installed. Yet if you look at the capacity utilization of wind energy in Spain, for the capacity that's installed, it's about 18%. Now, that's just because of the nature of the source, the wind, and the nature of the demand for the energy throughout the day and seasonally. So how does one live with 82% of capacity installation that goes unused? We certainly couldn't live with that in the oil and natural gas space. So wind has to overcome that challenge. So each of the sources have their challenges. In the biofuels area, today biofuels are largely manufactured using old, well-established technologies, and would acknowledge that a lot of work has gone into improving the efficiency of those technologies, but fundamentally we're not doing anything different. It's fermentation. So in the biofuels arena, there has to be a step out, another breakthrough, before biofuels, I think, can be competitive. There's work ongoing, but each of them have their unique challenges. I have commented many times and have argued to policymakers that the subsidies that have gone into corn-based ethanol in the United States have probably set biofuels innovation back as opposed to promoting it, because they have picked an old technology to subsidize at the expense of supporting new innovative technologies that might carry us much further in the long term. But there is the policy trade-off that goes with looking for the quick fix as opposed to the long-term sustainable solution. Those are the types of issues and questions that are vital for CAPSARC in the years to come to focus on and help policymakers understand, help the public understand. I can take the quick fix today, which is not sustainable and comes with a lot of other costs, or I can invest in the future. and which is what we continue to urge policymakers to choose.
And that's absolutely what we're attempting to do at CAPSARC, is to take these various trends, understand the policy implications of them, and then thereby develop sustainable policies based on that. And I think your point on the inherent problem with corn-based ethanol, I think that's right on point. And in addition to that, due to the growth in the world's population, there's also been increased price pressure in terms of basic foodstuffs as well due to some of these policies. So I think that's necessary to understand the broad-based implications of some of the policies that we're attempting to develop in order to meet this challenge with renewable energy. But I would like to move on. During your presentation, you did mention that the world's population is going to reach approximately 8.5 billion people by 2040. Now that's an enormous amount of humanity. It's absolutely enormous. Now, do you think that the growth in energy consumption by the world's population is going to mimic, let's say, past energy consumption? Because we know that most of this growth is going to occur in urban areas. And this is something that's quite different from past population growth, which took place mostly in rural areas or what have you. So what is this going to mean for the future of energy usage, in particular in the developing regions?
Well, it's the reason that energy efficiency is so crucial in our own outlook. Historically, over the last 30 years or so, if you look at energy consumption as a unit of economic output, by and large, the world has been able to extract about 1.2% per year of efficiency gains, just through technology advancements, better product delivery. And as we look to the future, we actually have an assumption that that will increase, that the energy efficiency gain will move to something more like 1.4 to possibly 1.6. Now that doesn't sound like a lot, but obviously on a compounding basis on this huge base of energy consumption that exists in the world, it makes a big difference. That's that fourfold difference in supply that I mentioned is required if we don't capture that. So if I can be optimistic about how we're going to meet this huge population's requirements in the future, is going to be the power of technology around energy consumption trends, that much of the developing world, where most of this energy growth will occur, has the advantage of starting from a different place from an energy efficiency standpoint. A lot of the developed world, the OECD world, still carries with it some level of inefficient energy consumption. As the developed world moves forward, they should be able to take advantage of the current technologies available and position themselves for future gains in energy efficiency.
About the role of unconventional natural gas, and certainly within the United States, it has been what is popularly known as a game changer. Now, there's a lot of speculation that other areas of the world have significant supplies of unconventional natural gas, in particular shale gas. So what do you think the role moving forward of shale gas is going to be, let's say even within the region? And as we know, industrialization in the region is based on the gas molecule. And there is some speculation or educated guesses that the region does hold significant amounts of unconventional natural gas. So perhaps this could be the key to unlock future economic growth. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, shale gas resources and shale oil resources can be found globally in a lot of regions around the world. However, what we've learned through the development of the shale resources in North America is all shale rocks are not created equal, and some are commercially viable and some are not. Clearly within this region, the Gulf region, you have some of the world's best source rocks anywhere. And so my expectation would be that shale gas in particular, and down the road in the future when those next increments from a cost of supply standpoint are developed, potentially even shale oil resources will be important to the region, certainly further out. But shale gas as a source of gas supply to the region can be made viable. It's really going to be a question of what are the cost structures that are put in place by government policy, which implies, therefore, what are the pricing structures to the consumer that are in place? Because shale gas does come certainly at a higher unit cost than most conventional gas is developed. Clearly onshore conventional gas anyway, which is what the region has largely been developing. So I think it can be an important part of the energy future here in terms of meeting domestic consumption needs. It can be an important energy source in the future in other parts of the world, similarly for meeting domestic consumption needs. And there will be exports of shale gas from North America, whether it's from the United States or whether it's from Canada. The resource is so large and the cost of supply has now been driven down to a point that it does make it viable to consider for export to consuming nations elsewhere.
Now, it's clear that in order to unlock these unconventional resources, it requires not only technology, but it requires knowledge. And this is something as well that you touched upon during your presentation. I think that going forward, the creation of knowledge, the creation of, let's say, the next generation that will have skills and expertise in order to unlock these new energy resources is going to be critical. So what do you think about the role of knowledge, let's say, moving forward in terms of future energy policy? Because I think that this is something that is not that well understood as of yet, but I think it's going to be critical moving forward.
Well, or hydrocarbons are responsible for high quality of life in Western countries, where many, let's say, environmentalists hail from. So, I mean, on this level, I mean, how do you think that we can really deal with this public relations challenge? Because, I mean, obviously, I mean, going forward, there is going to be a significant amount of dependence on hydrocarbons. Like, this is not going to change anytime soon. I mean, so how can we deal with this type of contradiction whereby the world's population is going to continue to remain dependent on hydrocarbons, but at the same time, it's been a bit unfairly targeted for various ills?
Well, I think first and foremost, we have to continue to do what we have successfully done for decades, which has enabled